So I'm going live.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. So welcome back for another session. So we have a excellent presentation awaiting us on portfolio forecasting lessons learned by Magnus Itterstad from Sweden. So Magnus is the head of analytics at Captario and has more than 15 years of experience from portfolio management in pharma R&D. Magnus supports customers on topics such as portfolio management, project valuations, and R&D strategy for both projects and portfolios. So relevant for us, and I'm really excited to know about these lessons learned on forecasting. I know that I myself have struggled always in the forecasting decisions, and I think many of you as well. So I invite Magnus on stage. So the stage is yours.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I think I'm sharing my screen, and I hope everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, great. So yeah, hi everyone, and thank you so much for listening into this presentation. As I was introduced here, I'm head of analytics and customer success at Captario. Before Captario, I spent a lot of time at AstraZeneca working with portfolio and portfolio management over there. So just a couple of words about Captario. We're a software tool and services company, and we build a software product to help drug projects and portfolios to make better decisions. We do this by gathering information about their projects and portfolios, and then run simulations and analyze the outputs of those simulations to create a decision support material. And you can see that we basically have two areas where we're working. And one is at the asset or project level. So the team can model current situation in the project that they're working on to great detail, and then include all of the factors that can affect their decision making. And then from there, they can also then create options and scenarios and iteratively find the best way forward with the project decision and create different options for the stakeholders to take into account. And the other part of what we do is portfolio management. And this is a lot about, as you all know, about keeping track of different versions of data from different projects and which projects are in and which projects are out, and manage how the data has changed over time and how that has affected the risk and the values and the composition of the portfolio. So that said about Captario, here's what I would like to talk about today. Portfolio management professionals, the way that we support projects and portfolio decisions is by trying to come up with and evaluate in different options and then present the results to the decision makers, right? Create some decision support material. And we typically try to model different decision options, and then by simulation or through other means, we try to create a prediction of what will happen if we select option A or option B. And a prediction often means that we have to create a model. So this presentation will be a lot around modeling drug projects and portfolios. And first thing we'll do today is to basically have a look at a decision analysis modeling example. And we'll go through a couple of options, and I'll explain some of the reasoning that was behind how we got to the conclusion here. And then after that, I think I'll try to break apart the modeling that we did and go through some of the key modeling features that we use about why they are important. And so my hope here today is to leave you with a couple of ideas on how to improve your project and portfolio forecasting abilities. And so jumping right into this example, it has to do with NDA filings. And so this is based on a real case that we worked on a couple of years ago. And the project had a situation on how to file for approval. And basically, the compound was being developed for a couple of different indications, and the FDA would not let you start a second NDA process before the first one had completed. Perfectly fine, though, to have two indications in the same submission. And so this basically gave us two options for how to file for approval. And First option is then basically to complete both of the phase 3 studies before filing. And this would mean that the indication A would have to wait until the second indication has finished. And the second option is to start filing for indication A. And this means that product B would have to wait. And of course, the big question then is, should we wait for that second study to complete? And if this situation was as static and rigid and as is shown in this slide, this will be a very easy back of a napkin kind of calculation. But we all know in the real world of drug development, there are always things that are complicating decisions. There's no such thing as like a binary decision. It's always like a grayscale. And this one was no exception to that. And one of the uncertainties was the time it would take to complete the clinical trials for indication A and B. And here we had to, in the modeling, we had to use ranges to represent the time to complete the trials. This created a dynamic that completely wiped out any binary kind of answers to the question. And the new answer was, well, it depends. And if study A completes very late and study B completes very early, then we're in one situation compared to them being very separated. And another complicating factor here was the market situation for project A. There's a competitor in the space, and the information that we had was that they were behind our project or the project that we were working with here. And being first in this area would mean a much bigger market share, of course. And so when we developed the market model, kind of the sales forecast for these projects or for the indication A here, we used a bottom-up approach. We realized that this situation with a competitor is something we need to include in the market forecast. And from the R&D model, we got our own launch window for our asset, and then we made some assumptions about the competitor and kind of created a launch window for that asset as well. And then the revenue model that we had to build had to kind of build on these launch timings, and we had to introduce order of entry and then have a market share that was dependent on the order of entry. And so the commercial representatives on the team were heavily involved in this and kind of teased out three different scenarios. Either we're first with a competitor, or we're first and the competitor is not there, or we're second to the market. And so we kind of had three different market sharing and order of entry scenarios in this one model. And this kind of led to the revenue curve being a revenue box and whisker instead of a curve, because we wanted to express all of the uncertainties that existed here. And so instead of a single line, you'll have basically a range for revenue. Very much dependent on if we're first or second, and also if we launch early or late. And so we kind of worked with this and together with the team, and in the end, kind of came to the conclusion that there were a number of different factors that would influence this decision, and two of the most important ones were these two. So the indication. The time for the phase 3 study for indication A, how long would that take by itself? That was a key decision point or key criteria. If it was done very quickly, then we could afford to wait longer for the second indication. And the same thing with the value difference between indication A and indication B. If indication A is worth 5 times as much as indication B, then we shouldn't wait at all. If it's only worth twice as much, then maybe it's worth actually waiting for project B. And so in the end, as I said, the result was not a yes or no answer. Yeah, you should pick option A. It was more like, depending on when you get your readout from project A, here's how you can tackle the situation when you get there. So in the end, providing decision support material that would kind of help the team to prepare. And with these analyses, they were more confident about what to do after that first trial kind of read out. And that's the kind of the end of this example. And there are a number of modeling features in play here that I want to go through and talk about a bit more. And so we need dependencies between projects so that these two projects can kind of wait for each other. So we need to have that functionality. And also we need to be able to capture operational risks in our models. And by operational risks, I'm talking about basically cost increases, risk of cost increases, and risks of delays. That's operational risks to me. And also we need to be able to dynamically create these market models, very flexible market models that can capture the commercial risks. If we are second to the market, our market share might be 35% instead of 80%. That's a huge downside. So that needs to be possible to model in the tool. And also, we need to be able to use ranges in the output so that we can convey to our stakeholders the risks that are in play. And so when we're modeling things, or this is showing how Captario sum models things. And basically you have activities that are the rectangles here and decision points, which are the diamonds here. And so the activities have things like costs and delays, and they can have durations. And the decision points basically have a probability of success or not. And that determines if we should go this way or that way. So in this particular instance, we had to use another feature, something that's called wait for. So we had to be able to say, actually, if in this indication B, we need to stop here and wait until the registration phase for the other project is done. And if we can't create these dependencies between projects in our portfolio model, and then we won't be able to do this. And this is a huge feature or thing that exists in the reality, and so we need to be able to model this as well. Here's another example of the same thing with project dependencies. I have a portfolio of, let's say, 8 assets. One of them is a key contributor in 3 other products. And so if the Anis asset is terminated, that also means that these other 3 get terminated, and we kind of lose half of the value of the portfolio instead of only losing 1 out of 8 assets. And so we need to be able to accommodate for these things in our modeling. And you know, there are tons of real product applications of dependencies. And so next thing is being able to capture operational risks. And here, I think, yes, as I said earlier, this is basically delays and cost increases that we're talking about here. And one way of capturing risks is by using ranges in our assumptions that we put into these models. So we asked for the team to give us a range instead of a point estimate. And another way of doing this that I really like is to actually, we take the plan value. In this case, for phase 3, we think it's going to be done in 18 months if everything goes according to plan. But then we have a risk log. And so we have a number of things that we know. These things can go wrong, and it has a certain impact on the timeline of this project. So the benefit of using this approach is that we can still forecast the entire portfolio using just the plans. So here's the portfolio forecast, given that everything goes according to plan. We can at least have a look at that. But then we can apply some of the things that we know will happen on top of that. And then we can compare the risks, and we can measure what is the impact of all of the risks. And so that's a very good way of doing this, I think. It also helps us make the risk log of each individual project very transparent, since we're bringing it into the portfolio management. And also what you can do is you can have portfolio level risks that you can apply across several projects that might be there, but that you don't necessarily want to bring into each project. And another thing that I think is that is key and important here is the possibility to have a very dynamic and flexible modeling, end-to-end modeling. And I'll talk about that and show this as an example. So here's another model. It is a bit complex. I'll go through it. It's something that that a customer actually did a couple of years ago. And so they were working on an investigational drug in a rare oncology disease, and they wanted to understand the likelihood to reach market and what a best case could look like. So here's what they wanted to do, was to start with, say, about 15 patients and look for an exceptional complete response rate. If they got that, then they would go up this path here and do a bigger, or expand that into a bigger study, continuing to look at complete response rate and then get to the market. If they didn't see their results, they wanted to add another set of patients and then try to get up there. If that didn't work, to basically then go into a more traditional phase 3 with a progression-free survival as the endpoint and reach the market 3 to 5 years later. So basically, in one model, 3 different ways to get to a launch. And I think it's really important to have this, the capability of having this in one model. First of all, we can see that we can launch in 3 very different areas in terms of 3 very different launch timings. And also, since we can model in the competitors, we can see how we're going to fare when we know which one of these paths we are getting close to, and we can see what is our chance to be first under these 3 scenarios. And when we make changes to this model, let's say that we add a couple of patients here or do something to speed this up, it'll have an impact on everything downstream. And so when we do things, we don't do it in isolation to maximize the chance to get to this upper path. What we do here may have a detrimental effect on the base case, so that overall the project value is less by trying to do something. So this gives us a very holistic view of the entire model. So that's the key takeaway here, I guess, is that. Okay, and also the ability to be able to take that very complex model and put it right into the portfolio so that we can evaluate it, because whatever we do in this project may have an effect on something that we can and cannot do in other projects as a consequence. So let's talk about risk and outputs. And sometimes I think that we're kind of afraid to show uncertainty to our stakeholders, and they sometimes require single value analytics. You know, here are the 2 options, this is worth more, let's pick that one. It's much easier to understand that kind of analytic, and so and it makes the decision much easier than to include the risk or uncertainty. And I'll show an example about this that has to do with launches. But first, do you watch the weather forecast? I do, but I never hear them say things like the expected risk, adjusted amount of rain, or expected or percentage of this or that. Typically what they say in the weather forecast is, it's a 50% chance of rain tomorrow, so bring your umbrella, right? And that's exactly what we want. We don't want any buzzwordiness about risk adjustment or things like that. So if we take that and look at portfolio management now, and have a look at this launch chart, I kind of like this view. It gives a great overview of what we're doing. We have a couple of assets, I think it's 6 in this picture, when they're launching and the chance of getting a certain number of launches in every year. I'm sure you've seen your own versions of this as well. So, and we can also see there that the line here is kind of adding together everything that we see per year. So in the end, we'll have 2.6 risk-adjusted enemy launches from this portfolio. And I like this view, but here's the kind of the problem with it. In order to simplify the forecast to give us just one view of what will happen, we're adding together fractions of real projects. And that is a simplification that doesn't really translate to the real world. And that gives us this impossible result of 2.6 launches. And to me, that is kind of like bringing half an umbrella if the weather forecast says 50% risk of rain. You're simplifying things too much, and that'll get you into trouble. So when we look at this launch chart, what can we do to help our audience to better understand those 2.6 launches, and how can we get away from like a single estimate that we know is not correct? So here's my take, or our take on this, is that let's show them all of the possible outputs instead, and show them what's the likelihood of hitting a certain number of launches. We have 6 projects in the portfolio, so there are 6 outcomes in terms of the number of launches. And we can see that it's a 35% chance that we'll get, that will be here, and 15% chance that we will get just 1 launch. So a lot of information here that we don't really see here. But this is good too. But this one is a very good thing to have to accompany it with. Here's another view, creating a cumulative version of the same slide, and this is a way, I think, and I've seen, is a way you can get the stakeholders to really start talking about the portfolio and mitigating risks in the portfolio. So let's say that we have a target of getting 3 launches in a portfolio. So here we can see we have 56% chance of getting 3 or more. So basically adding together these 3 bars here. 56%, that would keep me up at night if I have 56% chance of meeting a certain target. And that doesn't really come out in this picture, because here you see 2.6, and we round that off to 3, right? So we're going to meet the target. But when you actually use the numbers and quantify the risks, you get to this output instead. And this really drives some good discussions in a portfolio stakeholder group. Okay, so to conclude this presentation, we've been talking about a number of different things. I think that being able to show how uncertainty in assumptions lead to uncertainty in predicting the future. And being able to show our stakeholders those uncertainties. Be bold. It's all right to actually show them uncertainties, I think. And this will build trust and credibility with our stakeholders. And we should also use all of the knowledge that exists in the organization, and we should model all aspects that affect the outcome. Simplifications can be good if it's the right thing, but simplifying because the tool doesn't allow us to do this is not good. It might give us a skewed result, and we may make an incorrect decision based off of it. And also, if we simplify too much, our stakeholders will see it, and then they won't trust the forecast. We need to be able to also roll up our project modeling into the portfolio. We need to understand how project decisions impact the portfolio so that we don't make suboptimal decisions on the project level. And also, very important, we didn't touch upon it earlier, but this is proven time and time again. We need very quick turnaround time for our analysis for them to be used when needed. If it takes weeks to run a forecast for a portfolio, then we're not going to use it in a decision making, or we're just going to do it once and stick with whatever comes out. So very quick turnaround time is very important here as well. Okay, that is what I had for this presentation, and I want to thank you all for listening in to the presentation. And if you have any thoughts or questions about this, please email me or connect on LinkedIn. That's fine. And you can also connect with us at captario.com. We're also on LinkedIn. So I don't know if we have any minutes for some questions. Perhaps we do. I don't know if we have any questions. Mitun, do you want to help out with that?
Hi, Magnus. Thank you so much. What can I say? Tusen tack.
Oh, excellent.
It was really love this idea of weather analogy, and it's not only me. We have Corky saying it and Richard saying that, and I really like this idea of like half an umbrella is a bad idea, even if forecasting says it's 50% risk of rain, and you're so right. And I like the idea of the really sharing with the stakeholders and senior management about how when you have uncertain inputs, you are going to get uncertain outputs. And I like the idea also of the holistic view and having a really a dynamic end-to-end models. We do have a few questions, so uh, you can take 5 minutes to respond to those questions. So the first one is from Vladimir. I think we have three questions from him. How do you solve portfolio selection problems, say for 10 projects? There are 2 in 10 power portfolio combinations.
Oh, yeah. A portfolio selection problem. Yeah, you're. How would I solve for that? Well, I guess that uh, you can you can solve with optimization, which is something that we haven't talked about today. But I would solve that problem with optimization or by ranking projects by one mean or other. But it is also something that you can test out with by running simulations as well. You won't get to that 2 to the power of 10 different combinations, perhaps, but it'll give you a pretty good outcome to use in your analysis. Yeah, I hope I can answer that. I answered the questions.
Okay, so two more questions. So, um, okay, so sorry, on slide 6. So this question: if the company has unlimited resources, sequence does not matter. How resources incorporated into the tool? And Vladimir has another question, but I think you have already responded it. Does the model incorporate risk mitigation strategies?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to do risk mitigation strategies, you can certainly build that. I think there are a number of different ways to do that. We can certainly do that in Captario some. You can do that by flexing different variables. We talked a little bit about using ranges for some of the variables. If you want to test a lot of different options, let's say you want to test how many patients should I use in this particular clinical trial, or how many centers should I use, insert a range, run simulations, and try to find the maximum of where you hit the best return on that investment. That's definitely one way of doing it. Also, I think we talked a little bit about applying delays and different risks to the entire portfolio in one go. That's another way that we can do this. I mean, just this COVID, we spent a lot of time working on COVID scenarios last year, about this time last year, where people wanted to understand what happens if we are delayed in all of our clinical projects by 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. So that is something that is very powerful, I think. The ability to add a delay across a whole subset of the portfolio. And then also the ability to be able to toggle that on and off so that you can compare with what you had before. So you always can with the baseline that you had. I don't know if I think I forgot the other part of that question.
The other part of the question was on your slide 6. He says if a company has unlimited resources, sequence does not matter. How are resources incorporated into the tool?
Yeah, I mean, that can be done. Talking specifically about Captario, that can be inserted as different cost accounts for different resource types. So that's not a problem in Captario. For resource mapping and resource management and resource optimization, I would use an optimization feature for that, because then you would have like a multi-objective optimization problem instead.
Great.
But it is, since you have all of the numbers in one tool, it's not a difficult thing to do, to set up. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. You could set up on top of the normal configuration, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I would do. A resourcing problem, typically you can solve it with optimization if you want to find the absolute maximum. But I think another way of doing it is to have flexible capabilities compare with what you did last. So being able to say, oh, what if I actually increase the number of resources in that project? What if I do this? What if I pause that project for 6 months? What happens then? And if you can do those things very quickly, and so that you can have a very quick feedback loop, I think that's actually more powerful than running optimization algorithms. That tends to become kind of technical and should always advise decisions anyway.
Yeah. I have found it also very, very complicated a lot of times. So thank you so much for answering these questions. You have also one more compliment from Richard, who says communication of risk is as much art as science, and he appreciates these contributions. So thank you so much, Magnus, and we'll go backstage and we'll come back for the next fireside chat. So stay
Yep.
tuned.
Excellent. Thank you so much.